Hello everyone. Don't listen to me, listen to the triangle. Can I ask if there's spare seats near you, can you move down so that we have spare seats in the end? There's bean bags on the crocodile. If anyone wants to sit on a crocodile. If you have if there's a spare seat next to you, move along because there's like loads of people for everyone to see. Okay, so that was round one. This is round two. Now we're talking about art with these lovely people here. I'm going to introduce you. I'm just going to pitch my stuff again. The Barbican on our way. For these things, yeah. So London Graphic Novel Network, the Barbican Comic Forum, which is here. It's free. You can join. There's all the stuff over there. Join the library if you're not a member of the library. And borrow some books because it's National Libraries Day and basically the government's trying to close the libraries down. But if you guys join your libraries and take books out, then they're still going to close the libraries down. But we'll have the books. Okay, I'm going to let you guys introduce yourselves. And yeah, same form as last time. Take it away.
Okay, I'm David Allison. I'm a walking shambles. I write about comics at mindlessones.com, and I'm probably the person least qualified to talk about art on this panel.
Cool.
Good, thanks. My name is Chapman. I am the co-founder and editor at Comic Books Number Party. We produce all-women anthologies, so thank you for not putting me on the diversity panel. Oh my god, I'm sick of that. I am not an artist, but I work with a lot of artists, and I guess my main role at Comic Books Number Party is picking people whose art I like. So. Yeah, I'm very qualified. More qualified than you.
Cool. Next.
I'm Chapman. I'm a comics creator, and I also work for Avery Hill Publishing doing marketing for them.
Cool. And Russ.
I'm Mark Stafford. I'm a cartoonist. I co-created Cherubs with Brian Talbot and the Man Who Laughs with Dave Hine, and I'm the cartoonist in residence at the Cartoon Museum, amongst other things.
Cool. Thank you very much. Can I have a round of applause? Walking shambles. Do you want to
sitting shambles at the moment. Okay, so we were talking about the idea of art versus writing in comics, and my feeling is that this is a notion that carries over from a very specific area of comic books culture, which is the sort of production line model you've got with maybe Marvel or 2000 AD or DC comics, where you've got recurring characters and rotating creative teams. Now, I think this maybe gives you an opportunity to start imagining what would happen if you swapped one name in the credit box out for another. So, maybe you have a John Romita Jr. Spider-Man comic. You wonder what would happen to the dialogue, the action, if you swap maybe a Chris Weston version of that character into the scene. Now, you can mock the limitations of that approach, but I'd rather try and find what's useful in it. I think, let's just kind of find a way in for those of us like me who don't have a great vocabulary for talking about comics art, to working out what the totality of the experience of a comic is. So, it's a crude mechanism, but you get a bit of a feel for the way the visual and the verbal elements, the narrative and the non-narrative elements are interacting with each other. And if I'm talking too fast, someone throws something at me, okay? So another idea I think these kind of traditional fan debates bring us to is maybe the notion that different comic book cultures and fandoms have their own sort of sets of values and tastes and intelligences. And we want to try and work on recognising these so we can develop them wherever we find ourselves participating in them. I'm thinking here of the writer Jonathan Lethem talking about Jack Kirby's return to Marvel in the late 70s. He wrote an essay about how, despite the fact that Kirby was ostensibly a kind of king to the people who were reading these comics, his comics weren't very well received. They didn't really embody the values of the time. To quote Lethem, artists since Kirby had set new standards for proportional and anatomical realism, and superheroes weren't supposed to look cartoonish anymore. So I think what you get there is a wee bit of an insight into a comics community in the process of updating its value judgments. And I think this is quite interesting, because even if you disagree with the values that are being expressed there, they give you something you can push against. So I think, I'm quite a ridiculous person, and I'm truncating this wildly, so I'm going to hit out with a kind of ridiculous idea here, which is that people, we're a group of people who are willing to come on a Saturday night to listen to people talk about comics. What we might want to do is try and think about how we're doing that in a way that stops talented people like the ones I'm on a panel with from wasting their lives. And my premise is, comics doesn't pay very well, unfortunately. It probably doesn't offer you much respect, and it'll probably ruin your posture. So I think what we want to do as a comics community is try and build a modern day Tower of Babel, one that has the sort of existence of different languages, maybe even the necessity of them built into its foundations rather than being its inevitable downfall. So what do I mean by this? Well, what I mean is that different modes of reading comics aren't just possible, unnecessary given the vast variety of styles and genres and delivery methods out there. So I think, I don't really know what the centre of the comics conversation is these days. I don't know what's considered beautiful and what's considered ugly, and I think that's a good thing. What I'm calling for is that we don't just try and develop one new language of comics, but an explosion of new languages. Chrissy Williams said earlier that the more we read, the more fluent we become in that language, and I think we just want to have as many different languages that are necessary for the comics that are out there. Ding.
Thank you. Next.
Cool, so I regret saying I'm more qualified to talk. Because I don't even have my notes.
Yeah, yours is written much more stylishly.
This is just the question. Okay, so I guess when I was trying to think of what my response would be to this, I went over it a few times, and what's good art? I didn't want to ask that question, but I guess for me that is the main thing. I publish anthologies that are just dismissed as being twee as fuck, and they are. And I don't always love every comic that we get, in terms of it's not this is absolutely 100% my favourite type of comics art, but that doesn't mean it's bad, and so you work with people. Anyway, not every comic is your favourite comic. One of the other questions that was kind of broached was how much does the writing matter, and they do work together. I was thinking a lot about how you buy comics. I used to work at Gosh in Soho, and I think you get very good at knowing just from the artwork, am I going to like this comic? Am I going to hate this comic? There are some things which I'm sure are really well written that I've never read because, oh my god, I can't get past the first page, can't get past the cover design. And that's a flaw in me as a reader, but I still think it's a really big part of reading comics. I think anthology projects like 8 House and Island are really important, that Brandon Graham's working with, because they kind of force you to look at stuff that you wouldn't necessarily like. And I say force, I sit myself down with a cup of coffee and I'm I'm not going to stop until I've read every comic in this, even if it pains me. It does, and then I give them to my friends afterwards, and if they like it, you take them off Facebook, and that's, it's a good way of, but it does just come down to taste. At the end of it, I think is it bad or is it good? I don't know, personally. Oh, I'm not even going to say it. I was going to say something about furry comics, but let's just move on.
Thank you. Furry comics. Okay, next. Take it away.
So my day job is that I work in a theatre, and when a show isn't going over very well with the audience, one of the most common comments that people have is that it looks really good and the design is beautiful, but the rest is really disappointing. And in comics I've noticed that a lot, where people will show me a book and say that the art is really good, but I really didn't enjoy the story. And what that tells me is that telling good stories is really difficult. And I guess in films and TV it's quite a familiar feeling as well, when you feel like the people involved have thought that visual style or spectacle could make up for weaknesses in the story. And I come to this from the point of view of an illustrator who moved into comics, so I was all about art initially. And when I started making comics, I became aware quite quickly that it's a common pitfall, I think, for illustrators to think that it's easy to make a comic when they don't have any writing experience. And I realised that I was going to have to kind of up my writing game if I was going to make better comics. And from a reader's point of view, this is what Hannah was saying as well, I think one of the big differences between the art and the writing is the immediacy of the art, and that you know immediately when you look at it whether you like it or not, and it takes more of a time investment to read a book and decide whether you like the writing. And it does go without saying that it's really subjective. People value different qualities in art and writing. In my theatre job, we get to compare our reactions to the shows across a large group of people, and there's never ever a consensus. There can be 90% of people hate it, and there's still 10% that are best thing I've ever seen. The art in comics usually does most of the work when it comes to creating the world, the atmosphere, the emotional impact, but with the writing there's dialogue and narrative structure, what you reveal to the readers and when. And for me, comics are at their best and most interesting when both the art and the writing are working together to their full potential.
Cool. 2 minutes. Mark, take it
No
away.
way this is going to feel. Okay, there's a stupid debate that starts up on the internet every so often about which is more important in comics, the writing or the artwork. And the reason this is stupid is, well, consider this. You're drawing a graphic novel. It's from a script and it's a kind of rags to riches job. It's about an artist who gains the world and he loses his soul. It's kind of cliched job. Early in the story, before the rise, he's in a cafe with a mate and they're talking about this girl they really fancy. Later on, just before the fall, they're in a restaurant, the same two characters, and they're still talking about the same girl. Now, the script gives you nothing else other than the two guys, the situation they're in, the setting they're in. But, because you're an artist, because you know the story, you start making decisions. So you decide the first cafe, it's a real fucking greasy spoon job. It's kind of chip mugs, formica tables, there's workmen, there's little old ladies, there's some couple that are proud just on the verge of an argument. They're kind of squeezed in, they're surrounded by the common people, they're kind of drinking nose to nose almost. The cafe, the restaurant scene later on, maybe it's a table he's booked already, maybe it's one he regularly goes to. They're separated from the public by maybe a velvet rope. The food comes on tiny proportions, well designed on huge plates. The staff are ignored by the artist character and the body language and so on. You do all this kind of stuff to make the scenes what they are. Now, how much of that drawing could be considered writing? How much of it is conveying the story? How much would it be completely changed if you just decided to stick with the two characters, table, that's it? And so, the internet is a fucking idiot.
Cool, thanks to everyone. So I was wondering, is there a way for us now in the next half an hour or so to construct, because it's all very nice and we're all kind of like, different people like different things, and I'm thinking maybe you're going to be right and it's just going to be like, maybe 90% are always going to like it and 10% aren't, or vice versa. But I feel like there should be a way to say, like, this is bad comics art and this is good comics art. Like, is there any example?
I can do it in one.
Take it away.
This is good comics art.
Why?
Dex.
Really? I wanted you to come here and raise the debate, and you're just lowering it and just sinking and goes
The
down.
whole time on Kays and Gomorrah before, we're going to spend this one on Dex. No, I don't know. I don't know that we can ever come to a sort of definitive idea of what's good comics art, but I do think that maybe there's something valuable in experiencing bad comics art. I can't remember who it was that said that they wouldn't trust the aesthetic opinions of someone who's never read a truly awful fantasy novel. I think I'm definitely right there with them on that. And so I'm simply someone who edits anthologies, so I'm hopefully not going to get punched out of my chair here. Because I was thinking the two places where I most often encounter what I think of as bad comics are in, again, sort of Marvel or DC comics. Maybe it gets interrupted. Maybe there was a penciler you liked one issue, there's a different one the next. The other one is anthologies, where maybe you've picked it up and had to flick through and liked quite a few strips. And then you find something that you think looks like someone scrawled it using a dog turd they picked up off the street.
Oh, you've read.
So I don't know that I'm kind of going to be able to tell you what good comics art is, but I do think that you can only really understand what it is if you have an experience of something that you think's bad art, and that's what I was trying to get to. And to tie back into Mark's point about the internet being a fucking idiot, I mean, it's true, but it's my kind of fucking idiot, because I think one thing we've got to get maybe used to is the value of stupid arguments and bad opinions. Because again, it's something to define yourself against. And so again, to go back to your thing about you can't really distinguish what's writing from what's art in terms of the way you're thinking, like a lot of the narrative details being provided by the art there, but like even just asking that question, what did the writer suggest here, it does provide you with a way to start questioning these kind of storytelling values, what is being conveyed in that scene. So even if it's a stupid way into the conversation, I still think it's a way in.
What do you guys think? Hannah, what do you think?
That's why I was hoping someone could pick up on it and make it sound proper.
David, just there's this idea of bad comics art, and you had the lovely example of dog feces. But what is bad art? And how do you recognise it? Is it just that it's ugly because there are like a certain aesthetic, and like for me, like I grew up with kind of 2000 AD, and like especially in the period where it was all kind of like really painted and like kind of, you know, Simon Bisley, yeah. And that to me, that's like good comics art because it's detailed, it's nice, it's lush. And other stuff when it's kind of like all kind of like, there's definitely a kind of tradition now of kind of like scratchy kind of stuff where it looks like it's just kind of been done like that, and it kind of strikes me as being bad because it's not immersive enough.
So like bad is just what you don't like.
Oh
like,
yeah, obviously,
bad
yeah.
comics for anyone is I don't like this. This is bad.
But
what's
your definition of bad? Like do you have
well,
like?
It's awkward. Like I grew up reading Preacher and Judge Dredd, and like I love that artwork, but like it's for that. Like I don't want to like publish that in my anthology. So I don't know. Like I feel like I have like a very broad taste. Things that I don't want to pick up are Gail Simone's run on Batgirl, and I did some research to try and find out whose fault I think that is, and I can't choose between the following people. The pencils of issue 1 were by Adrian C.F., the inker was Vincent Cifuentes, the colourist was Adam Hughes, and also someone called Ulysses Areola Polmer, according to the internet. I think they're all equally to blame because the artwork was ugly and the colouring was ugly.
Why was it ugly?
Because I don't like it. I don't know. Like it had loads of gradients, like lens flares, and like it kind of looked super, like 90s. I don't know when it was published. I don't know. Like it wasn't to my taste, and I know for a fact that if you kind of stuck like some classic 2000 AD artwork in front of me, like I could very easily like it, but I might not. I don't know.
Would you go see?
I think bad art doesn't tell the story. I actually recommended somebody teaching a course, but as part of their reading materials, obviously they should have, you know, Marjan Satrapi and Mouse and whatever, but also they ought to have Rob Liefeld's fucking Captain America. Because it laid bare what the artwork wasn't doing and the information it wasn't giving, and how stupid, and you know, just the amount of time and space it gave to badly proportioned characters just grimacing at you, and the lack of information about where the hell they were and what was going on, and just the script was entirely contradicted by bits of the artwork. There's supposed to be like this big group, and like, are they a neo-Nazi party? There's this big news report, and then Rob Liefeld pictures them, and they've got a fucking swastika behind them.
It's ambiguous at best.
Kat, what do you think?
Yeah, I was going to say something similar. I was going to say whether the art's contributing anything to the story or to the feel of it. And sometimes I can see stuff where it's very simple style of drawing, and that can suit a certain kind of material, but sometimes I might feel like there's the potential for it to do more, and I would find it more exciting maybe if it was, I don't know. But it is personal taste, really. But one of the things we do at the theatre is we do enjoy, like you were saying, we enjoy watching stuff that's really, really dire and terrible, and just trying to work out why, like what's gone wrong with this, which is quite a valuable exercise, I think, to try and pick it apart, why it doesn't work.
Absolutely, and I think there's maybe like something we said here. You're talking about, most of us are agreeing that if it doesn't tell the story, if it doesn't serve the sort of mode of reading we're being put into by the comic. So I think, you know, you can maybe take from that the idea that ugliness and badness in comics art is site specific. So like some things are deliberately ugly, like we were saying, or maybe deliberately not pretty to look at in the same way that like a Neil Adams Batman comic's trying to embody a certain ideal of physical perfection, whether it gets it or it doesn't. So something like Brian Chippendale's Maggots, it's aiming for almost that sort of feeling of noise on the page. I don't know if you've read it. It's almost like the
Maggots?
Maggots, sorry. Okay. It's drawn over a Japanese catalogue, I think, and it's just like really packed with all these little tiny scratchy panels, and everyone's looking at me really blankly, so I don't think anyone... Oh, Duncan, that's good. Thank you. So that's it. You know, it's maybe traditionally, if you put that beside most comics art, it would look quite ugly. But the effect it's trying to achieve is one of kind of volume and noise and really kind of overwhelming the reader. So I think these things depend, and maybe that's when it's bad art. It's either not suiting the context that exists in, or it's not generating a context that's interesting to engage with as a reader.
Engaging with context that's interesting.
It's not engaging with a context that's interesting. Yeah, I mean, you could have a boring context. Like there was a wee attempt a couple of years back by some people, comics critics, to sort of rehabilitate Rob Liefeld, I think. It's sort of an idea that, maybe you could look at him as some sort of...
Like a Kickstarter.
Yeah. Pitch him the stretch goals, he'll come round to your house, he'll make you tea, it'll be nice, you can have a chat. But, to basically like try and say that maybe he's a sort of almost like a forgotten genius because he's doing these things that are really kind of counterintuitive but really weird and expressive and interesting in their own regard, and I think that's probably bollocks, right? But it was, at the same time, I read some things that maybe aren't, like I was saying, Brian Chippendale, maybe not traditionally beautiful art, still quite impressive and overwhelming and powerful in its context. And some things don't even really engage with me that much on a narrative term, but they're still maybe worth reading. I think Brandon Graham we've mentioned a couple of times. I don't actually really go to Brandon Graham comics for the story over much, but I do think his work creates a sort of context in which you can kind of immerse yourself in the details of it, and that's kind of a fun thing to kind of engage with in its own way. So it's a context that's interesting, even though I don't really care what's happening in Profit. I just pick it up and there's some cool shit happening every month, or every 12 months or whatever the publication schedule is. Am I talking complete piss?
No. What do you guys think? Do you think?
I also really like Profit.
Do you care what's happening now?
Well, I didn't get it when I was reading it. It was like Profit made me take out Standing Order because someone recommended it, and I was like, okay, I guess I'll get this weird thing. And then trying to read it as the issues were coming in, I was like, this makes no sense. And then I recently sat down and kind of read them all together, and I was like, oh, there's a story in between all of the artists. And like, there are people I prefer. Like, I really like it when Simon Roy does the artwork. There are some people that I don't like when they do it, and I can't remember their names. I can't.
Is it that guy who's really sparse, and it's just like all of, like Profit's really cool because how many people here have read Profit? Or can we just keep talking about it? Yeah, it'll be fine. Okay, so yeah, when it started off, I can't remember the names of any of the artists. It was really Milo. Thank you. It was really kind of detailed, and like it felt like it was like a window into it, and you can just see all the stuff. And there's this one guy who does they're on the ship and they've got the robots, that doesn't narrow it down. But it's just really sparse, and again, like it's almost like for me personally, I almost have a thing like if I'm going to sit down to read it, I kind of want something that almost looks like it's taken time to produce.
I feel like they put some effort in.
Yeah, and especially with Profit, where it feels like some of the artists, it's like it feels like it's taken a really long time, and some of them it feels like it hasn't.
I think that's bullshit.
Why?
So like this guy knows how to draw in 10 minutes and this person takes an hour? Like, that's their problem. Like, okay.
Yeah, I agree. I don't think that necessarily means it's good or bad. Like one of the talking points you gave us to think about was, is a good artist like implicitly able to make good comics? And definitely not.
No brow! We talk about no brow.
Let's do no brow.
Yeah, that's kind of what I was coming to from the idea of an illustrator kind of making comics without kind of perfecting any writing skills or having any experience of that.
Do you want to name any names?
Well, I'm talking about myself. Because when I came to it, I realised like I do need to know what I'm doing with the writing side, and if I make it look pretty, that doesn't mean it's going to be a good comic.
Is there anything that you've learned as you've gone along that's like improved? Artist people, like what can you tell us in terms of taking the script and making it into a thing that works?
Oh God, it's all kind of instinctual by now. But it's taken me ages to actually learn composition and things like that. That thing of leading the eye to the thing that you need to see. And first, if you just fill a panel with like detail and you think, I'm really happy about this, and then a reader will come along and go, and they won't get the fact that you're trying to tell them this guy is walking into this house or he's seeing so and so. There is that thing of so much visual art can be subjective. If I do a painting and it's of a shark and you decide it's about vagina fucking dentata, be happy. You can go, it doesn't matter anything. Buy a hat, have a fucking beret. But if you're doing a comic and the panel's supposed to be telling you the cowboy has fallen off the horse and the person reading it doesn't get that, you have objectively failed. That panel is shit.
It is shit. It's a shit.
Dave, what do you think? Do you want to add to that?
No, not really. I don't have much to add to it. I think that's a fair enough point. On your point of wanting to feel like effort's been put in, I'm going to agree. We're going to gang up on you. We're going to probably lynch you by the end. But
bring it on.
I do think it's bullshit. Cause some of my favourite 2000 AD art I've ever seen is Dan White did just random quick sketches of all the 2000 AD characters on his hands and knees during a panel once, and it was fucking amazing. So
I've got one of the originals.
I just got it here to get no shit.
I was wearing a bin on my head as well.
He was on his hands and knees wearing a bin on his head.
What was this and why and who and what? Any questions to anyone from outside? Yes, you.
I just want to throw in, so XKCD and dinosaur comics versus, say, J.H. Williams III. Ridiculous amount of effort. People usually call J.H. Williams objectively beautiful and baroque. XKCD is stick people. Yet J.H. Williams by himself and Batwoman didn't do as well as XKCD is still doing.
Right.
Because of what you were mentioning about the writing skills. So do you think there is something, how is it speaking against that idea of effort? How much effort is going into it? Do you think Randall Munro is putting more effort into his stick figure comics versus J.H. Williams taking years,
Like
or Dave McKean taking years to do one piece?
Like XKCD is cool, and I love XKCD, and it's really smart. But it's like maybe like it's not the case that I should be saying one's better than the other, but definitely one has like when you pick up a J.H. Williams comic, you definitely get like a flood of sensation of just all the colours and all the shapes like hitting you. But with XKCD, it's more like it's a kind of cold and slightly kind of Arctic thing. And the joke, and a lot of the time, it's basically reducing concepts to their barest possible element. So you can tell that the cowboy has fallen off the horse, but it's not much more than that. And I guess what I like with comics, and it's, again with the prophet person whose name I can't remember, I can read it and I can understand what's going on, but I don't get. And I think it's really interesting so far with the art panel. Like I'm finding it hardest to explain what I want to say, because I think when we talk about art in general, like our vocabulary is like tiny. Like we're really good at talking about writing.
That's what
and
for.
That's right. If we had a better way to talk about art, like I think that would improve the kind of art. Like words are really good at talking about other words, and I think if we kind of increase the vocabulary of like artwork, like if you. Like when I try to like review a comic book, and lots of people say, "Oh, you should always like try and talk about the art," but a lot of time, all you can talk about is the writing, because the artwork is just like. If I was going to describe, let's bring it back to Dick's. If I was going to describe that Dick's book, like what is it? Like it has it's very cartoony, and what is the? Is that? It's disgusting. Put it away. You know what I mean? Like it's.
Yeah, people fall back on one or two words, like it's stiff, it's loose, it's scratchy. I think I do that certainly, and these things are.
What are we talking about? Comic book.
My decks are not scratchy. My many decks. I brought them with me. They're in the audience. No, I think we do have quite a limited vocabulary of most of us. I mean, probably artists have a more extensive one. I'm sure you can probably put me to shame on that. Oh yes. But that's why I was trying to come up with this idea of maybe trying to look at the totality of the experience of a comic. Because I don't know. You're right that we don't maybe have the right words to describe what's going on in this wonder here, which I'm just going to hold up as cover for the rest of this. I think we can maybe try and work out the overall experience and try and work out a better vocabulary for dealing with that. And I don't think that's separate necessarily from the things that you're thinking of when you're talking about profit, the experience of writing about the writing. I think most of the meaning and profit for me is in kind of the incidental details, this kind of constant repetitious focus on the fact that people need to keep consuming things. There's always people eating in the background, and I think the art kind of tunes into a similar vibe to that, because it's kind of quite tactile, right? It's got quite a lot, as you were saying, a lot of it's quite detailed and overwhelming. Even the sparse stuff, it tends to be notable for its distinctive designs and individual textures. So I think both the writing and the art there are pushing for a focus on specific things, their kind of physical properties. And does this make any sense?
Yeah, it makes sense.
So I think when you're talking about art and writing, you can maybe be doing both if you're trying to get what the overall experience of a comic is, whether it's an abstract thing or whether it's a kind of story. And I think that's where the art fails or succeeds.
There was a bit where you were on the London Graphic Novel Network, you were talking about Ghost World, and it really bugged me because everybody was talking about the story and the plot and stuff. And so much of that book is about Dan Clowes' artwork and the fact that he drains the dynamism from people and the crappiness of the cafes and that kind of California, nothing's over 2 stories, and the kind of there's this whole, a lot of the humour in the book is entirely a visual thing, where it's kind of an anti-superhero kind of deal, in that nobody in that is dynamic and in control of their destiny or whatever, and so much of that is given by brushstrokes on paper, and nobody in your forum brought that up, and
if only you were on
angrily angrily stropped in and gave one message right towards the end. But it does bug me though. You read a lot of reviews and they don't bring up this stuff. Or they'll talk about the story in, say, Chris Ware, and don't talk about the fact that it's delivered in a really strange way. It's like talking about a film and not mentioning that the edits are every 2 seconds in a Michael Bay film, and in a Tarkovsky movie they're every 10 minutes. That's a different fucking deal, and it should be brought up in the language.
Katie maybe referenced this earlier when he said that it's kind of similar to when people start trying to review film. They were coming from backgrounds where they've been discussing literature or poetry and so on, so they were using a certain set of criteria that didn't have much applicability to the medium of film. And I think we're probably in a similar-ish space with comics. We have a joke on our website where it's like you will just have a paragraph of art paragraph, because that's what it feels like when you're reading a comics review, right? You get a kind of little synopsis of the story paraphrased, and then you just get, oh yeah, the art was a bit like Jack Kirby, or not like Jack Kirby. That's the 2 standards we talked about.
Hannah, what would you guys say?
I don't know, I'm quite interested in what Hannah was saying about, because I'm exactly the same about how swayed I am immediately but when I pick up a book by the artwork, and I'd be interested to know what proportion of people kind of would agree with that they they base their decision on whether to buy it on the artwork alone, because I have the same kind of concern of am I missing out on some great books because I just can't bring myself to buy it because I don't like the... But I wonder whether that's true of everybody. A friend of mine said to me the other week when I was talking about this with him, he said for him the artwork is super important when he's looking at it in the shop, but the second he starts reading it, he doesn't care about it anymore, and at that point it's the story that is important to him and the writing. So, but yeah, I wonder, there's probably people that aren't quite so swayed by the look of it.
Definitely that thing of looking at art and just thinking, oh god, this looks like hard work. Just can I read that lettering? What am I supposed to be looking at? Because all the line weights are exactly the same, so I can't tell what's foreground and background and whatever. And you just, life's too short. Fucking.
But life's also too short to pick up a book and say this is really beautiful, and then you go and read it. Maybe you've picked up Roman Muradov's Lost and Found, published by Nobrow. Maybe you're reading another bus on your way to work. Maybe you could have done other things with your time. No one, at any point, decided to give him some editorial feedback on the writing or the story. That's my reading of the situation, and I think you have huge problems when you have an entire publishing house that focuses only on the artwork. Like, if a Nobrow book is readable, it's got nothing to do with an editor. That's because they've lucked out and found an artist that can also write. It's so annoying because the books are beautiful, but can you warrant buying it if it's going to be nonsense? 1 out of 5 times? I don't know. It's so hit and miss with the writing, and I do think one of the questions was I can't remember something to do with art and writing. Art doesn't make up for bad writing, and artists not always good writers.
Yeah, and I would agree. I find it particularly frustrating when I've picked up a book that looks beautiful and it's really disappointing because I just know the amount of work that's gone into making it, and I just wish that, I don't know, they'd done more work on the story or they'd had more editorial feedback.
Just someone holding their hand and saying this isn't a good idea, friends, step away.
I was thinking of Ralph Kidson's small press comics and stuff like that. Well, it's essentially scribble. He had two characters called Envelope and Stick. And
Wow.
basically a line of that coming off, and another one was an envelope, which is a square like that. And the drawing, not particularly evolved. But, but if it was any better drawn, it would be less funny. There was something about the beauty of... It's like the crappiness of the animation in South Park. It's absolutely perfect for what it's doing. And there's certain characters that are like, tons of small press creators have a very limited drawing style compared to Raphael, but it's absolutely perfect.
The turtle.
It's perfect for what they're doing. It's perfect to get across the story.
But that's what I was talking. Yes,
Bad art is the stuff that doesn't get across what they're trying to do.
I have a question.
Hello. Nearly all of you, have used the moral precepts good and bad to describe art, when I'm not actually sure that's entirely what any of you mean. When,
Yes,
bad, evil, good, evil, whatever. But this question for all of you, for the words good and bad, could you give me another word which tells me what you actually mean?
Ugly.
Ugly.
Like bad is ugly, right?
Bad, I would say baffling.
Baffling can be
Interesting.
Is that good?
Yeah.
Both bad.
Yeah.
Again, I think for me it would be sort of site specific. So like if it's a superhero comic, it might be kinetic, it might be, again, beautiful is a really easy, cheap word. But again, if it was maybe like a Peter Badge comic, like a positive one instead of good would be, hilarious, it would be grotesque. Again, I think I don't know if I could come up with a value specifically for good or bad, because I think it would have to be...
Could we throw out these good and bad words, because it seems to me, I mean, they're sort of helpful, but they actually are incredibly reductive, and they're also not what you're saying. It seems.
I think you're totally right, but I think it'd be easier to do that if we're talking about specific things rather than like about art and comics as general.
I think the word is effective. You're looking for effective and ineffective.
Yeah.
That's really what all you're saying. Sorry to shout like that.
I think I mean bad. Like,
Somebody's going to come and get you.
there's like some philosopher who talked about what people mean when they say good or bad, and he said that when people say bad, what they really mean is. And I think that captures my feeling when I read a comic. Like the thing that's really interesting about comics compared to most other mediums is that they are so immediate. And talking about when you just pick them up, and like I do it all the time, and I know some people in the past said, "Oh, you shouldn't just pick a comic and just flick through it." But that's how you do it. Like, especially in a library, you're like, okay, well, there's all these books I can borrow. No, and it's like it is just if it's good or bad. And I almost like I think you can go further. You can make it more complicated, but you don't need to.
Has anyone here? I mean, I'm trying to think of a good example where I'm coming up stumped, but like had an artist who they thought was bad, they've then learned to appreciate what was happening in their work in a sort of way that made it, quote unquote, good.
Like I didn't have it like I'm always right about if I like something or not personally. But someone on a podcast did say that when they first picked up one of our anthologies, they're like, this shit. And then they felt like they had to take it back afterwards because, but that like not just one person's art in particular, but just kind of this idea that if something's sketchy or like juvenile looking or it looks like a children's book, that doesn't mean it's necessarily like a bad, ineffective comic. It just, I don't know, like they learned to appreciate it maybe, or it just was maybe something they weren't used to. And sometimes it is like it can be off-putting if you're not like used to a style, if it's like very different and out there, and it does take a little bit of time to learn how to read it and like learn the language that person is conveying. I don't know. I've lost myself.
No, like with Chris Ware, like the first few times I tried to read Jimmy Corrigan, just couldn't. Like it was like reading a migraine. It was just too much. But eventually, because there are like I'm trying to think, but there are a few comics where you start off and it's just like this looks, and then as you kind of go on, it's a spell and it captures you and you kind of learn to you learn to appreciate what the artwork's actually doing. Like when Chris Ware, like you're saying before, like it's maybe it's not the most flashy Summer Bisley style or whatever, but it's everything it's doing it's
doing it for a reason.
Because it's effective.
Yeah.
You've got a genre, that's someone that I used to find really kind of ugly and uninviting. But I like Garth Ennis comics, so therefore if you want to read Garth Ennis comics, you're not going to draws half of them. And he flows very, very well. You know what I mean? Ultimately, I think like the last thing actually, it just is actually incredibly well, like the timing and stuff, and things like that. So it's, you know, it's ugly, but in terms of like storytelling, yeah, it's great plans. And there is an appeal to be had in it, but it took me a long time to actually see it.
And this guy's in physical danger if I don't answer him. Go on.
No worries, no worries. When it comes to comics as well, I mean, we talked a lot about the artwork and the writing, but also I feel that a lot of the other elements affect it as well. I mean, there's inking, for example. I love S.M.A.S.H, who was an artist in Spider-Man, but in the late 90s he was inked by Bill Sienkiewicz. He was a great artist as well, brilliant artist, both of them, but together not quite. When you have someone who's got quite simple lines with the guy who inks with heavy blotches, it just looks like a wreck. And I feel it's really important to, so how do you consider how everything else affects comics? I mean, as well, there's also some books that are plotted by somebody and then written by somebody else. I mean, there's also the art collaboration, so how do you think that affects the overall element of comics, where it's not one person just doing that bit of the work, but it's like 2 or 3 people handling that aspect at once?
Anyone? I don't know. Like when I just read it and have no idea. Like when I see the inkers and pencilers, I'm like, who did what? Like which person? Like the inker did the ink and pencils did the pencils. But it's hard to really know if you kind of get to the end.
I think again it goes back to a lot of the stuff that was discussed in the meaning panel in terms of you can't really ever probably get down to intent, so you can only deal with the reception of what's going on there. So like there's probably a way of reading comics that's quite literate into the process, and that probably provides one like lens which will give you a lot of interesting information about what's going on in the page. I think there are several others, and like most of us probably are coming at it from the perspective where we don't have that kind of level of insight. I don't think that's necessarily invalid, but it's just maybe a different sort of insight you're getting from what's going on in the page. You're getting the kind of final effect rather than being able to maybe quite so well unpick what's going into it.
Have you guys ever been inked or coloured?
I think somebody else, and it was all horrible.
Why?
Just because I couldn't second guess what he was trying to do with various lines, and I suddenly found myself staring at things and going, is that top of the table? Is this? And it completely threw my brain out. I hated it.
Are you allowed, like, as an inker, can you just not just, if you don't like a bit, just ink over it and do something else? Or like, are there rules?
Yeah. I mean, I'm probably never going to do that again. But
yeah, my stuff doesn't involve ink at all, and also the stuff that I tend to read and the stuff that I make tends to be one creator writing and illustrating, and I think it's interesting because it does get more complex the more people that are involved with a creative project, so that things like collaborative things like film and theatre I feel have the potential to fail more easily because there's just so many people.
What I like to do is just print off like one copy of each angry letter about the comic and just send it to all of them, so that the blame is kind of just spread across the whole object. I won't read their names again, but there's too many cooks, maybe, I don't know. There's a lot of people involved.
Question, who you guys have spoken before? Anyone who hasn't spoken? Sorry, that sounds mean.
I think this is going back a bit to where we're talking about good and bad artwork. And I think something that has kind of been touched upon a bit is that I personally think there's a difference between artwork that is objectively good and bad, right, which means doesn't fulfill the criteria of is it effective storytelling, is the anatomy good, does it reflect the expressions on the people's faces that it's supposed to have, is it consistent across panels, etc, etc, etc. And the idea that your subjective judgment, which is do I like this or not? And I think equating that something ugly is therefore bad, I think is, as much as I respect Hannah's opinions on lowbrow, there's definitely a kind of, in your sort of people's critical brains, you've got these two things that are going simultaneously. It's almost like you've got two axes. So you've got the kind of axes of is it objectively good or bad? And yeah, I'm going to use the words good or bad as a moral judgment here. Because I think there are certain standards of drawing and storytelling that you need to have in a thing. For example, I remember reading a Sandman comic many years ago in which there was a character who had a cup of tea, and there was she was drinking this cup of tea across several panels, and each panel was a pretty different cup. Different size, different shape.
Yeah.
Like the artist couldn't bother to like even make the same thing consistent. And as far as I'm concerned, that's bad art, right? But you might really like that art. You might think that style's cool. I like the scratchiness. I like the way they use the blacks or whatever. And you might enjoy that, even though it's bad, right? But you might see something that's really beautiful, well proportioned, painted in a really lovely way, and you might not like it because you might just go, "Ah, I hate big shiny breasts and bulging muscles," or whatever. Even though, you know, for example, for Simon Bisley, you might not like that, but it might still be good. So I think, and that counts for a lot of things. Like if you think about Harry Potter, that's kind of shit. But,
Harry Potter's not shit.
But,
We don't even talk about Harry Potter. Harry Potter's...
That is just a
but
description
loads
of
of
subjectiveness
people
and taste.
really like that. Even though it's got loads of...
And we're going to do a Harry Potter panel, and it's going to go on for 3 days.
What I'm saying is there are loads of technical problems with the writing of Harry
Yes,
Potter. Okay?
absolutely.
Right, the range of writing is not very good, it's quite derivative,
Yeah.
the plots have loads of holes in them.
But the meaning of Harry Potter is...
Technically something can be really bad, right, but you can still like it a lot, and it can have emotional resonance, and it can have like personal meaning, and it can have a kind of cultural significance and stuff, but it doesn't necessarily mean that objectively, technically speaking, it's good.
Anyone want to add to that? We've got about 1 minute, so 30 seconds each. That's not 2 minutes.
I would just repeat that. I think what you were saying is that like it's taste. Like that is like it's taste, and the argument is like if I don't know how else to say it other than like it's okay to not like something and it's okay to like something.
It is, yeah. But I think there are certain objective standards that you can judge things by.
I think these are like technical qualities though, and like half of my favourite music's probably bad from any number of technical standpoints, but there's still lots of other valuable attributes in it. And my kind of final part of the thing is going to be, I don't think it really matters whether we're right or wrong or have kind of like good tastes or bad tastes. I think we just want to develop our tastes a bit more so we're not left like me babbling a couple of words like ugly or grotesque or kinetic when we're trying to talk about our favourite comics.
30 seconds each. Thanks, Mark.
I'm going to say the same as Mark. Yeah.
I mean, there's obviously... I think you've got to go over a certain hump in artwork of just being able to tell what the hell's going on, and after that, it's all gravy, baby. You know, when I say it's got to transcend across a certain point, you know. But like on say Preacher, for example, I kind of think that's the most meat and potatoes art job ever. But like the Steve Dillon, it perfectly does the job. It tells you who the characters are and where. But on the other hand, Steve Dillon draws a bar in New York, and he draws one in New Orleans, so they look exactly the fucking same, and he's not really interested in giving us like all the other stuff. He doesn't take us anywhere.
I was right there when that Cyclops had sex with the I was right there.
That's a great place to end it.
What